Hey guys, it's Caban with True Champion Gaming. Today we're going to be doing a Grand Archive deck profile. So Grand Archive very recently released with their Dawn of the Ashes Altar Edition, and we've seen some online tournaments so far where Fire Lorraine, Wind Lorraine, and Fire Rye have been really dominating those tournaments. They're basically the tier 1 decks right now. Water Xander's pretty up there too, but you know, it's been kind of established. I think there's a lot of room for the meta to grow, though. I think there's going to be some decks that come out on top, and we'll see some stuff shift up. This one is probably not one of those decks, to be honest. We're trying to play Water Rye, which that already is pretty unheard of, but we're also doing it with the win con of Mill, which doesn't really exist in this game right now. No deck's really trying to mill. The interesting thing with this game is that there is floating memory in every deck, pretty much every deck, and that actually is a resource that helps your opponent when it's in their graveyard. So the mill decks that are usually coming out right now are usually targeted a little bit more towards self-mill, not with the intention of decking yourself out, but of putting resources into your graveyard. So let's just go right into the material deck. So we have Water, which is basically has the best mill cards, and it also has a lot of defenses. Really, if you're going to go for an actual mill deck out strategy, this is pretty much the only color that you can go with. We have the 3 levels of Rye, and we are using the Mana Weaver Rye, which is actually in the set. Most Rye decks are using the Theme Deck Rye, which gets +1 level for each banished arcane card. We don't really do that, so it's actually better to have the Rye that can copy spells, because that way later on you can copy maybe a mill spell or something and just hope to get that last push. The big reason that we do Rye is just for the enlightenment counters. There's a lot of mage spells that you can run in here that are defensive, and you can keep that draw up, since really all you're doing is using your resources to defend yourself. You need to refuel those. So frequently I would find myself just kind of sitting on level 2 Rye just to really, you want to get to this as quick as possible to get that enlightenment counter every turn once you play a mage card. But the level 3 is not really crucial. We play a very low count of arcane cards, and the resources to get into it might not be what you want all the time. So there were definitely games that I would just sit on a level 2 champion. Then we have a Sword of Seeking. We play 4 Deflecting Edge in here, so while you're not really going into this to have a weapon necessarily like a Lorraine deck would, if you go into this for free in a materialization phase, then you get your Deflecting Edges turned on for free, which is really great in a defensive deck. And then you also can, poke off something. Let's say you maybe have a dungeon guide out as well. Now you can kill a good amount of things in this game have 2 health, so you can kill off some stuff as well. We have a GCR because every deck's running GCR. And then we have Wind and Fire Baubles. Most of your material deck stuff is just going to be card draw to try to keep up resource counts. Mana Limiter, same thing, just basically a card draw. Safeguard Amulet is for, we're a defensive deck, so for facing something like Arcane Rye, that's a really good card to go into. Nullifying Lantern, you don't really need any water-based stuff in your graveyard, so if you're facing a fire deck, this might be a good defensive card to go into. And Tome of Knowledge, because again, just anything that can really give us card draw. You're not really going to use the +1 level too much. It's pretty irrelevant in this deck. So that's the material deck. Now let's go into the main deck. We have 4 dungeon guides, and that's because, like I said earlier, you really want to get into that level 2 Rye kind of as fast as possible, so that you're getting all your material cards or enlightenment counters. And since you lose 2 cards at random for going into the level 2, it's basically just a free materialization, which we play Avalon, which doesn't let us materialize unless we sacrifice it. So you want to do as much materialization as fast as possible so you can drop your Avalon earlier without getting as hurt from it. And then we have the 4 Deflecting Edge. Might seem a little weird to run in this deck, but because we don't really run swords, you're not going to go into the free sword too often to turn this into a free defensive card. But honestly, defensive options are a little limited right now, and this can be a really good thing. The nice thing is that you can stop 3 damage from a Rending Flames, and if you prevent that, then they won't be able to double that damage. So that's a pretty good thing that you can do, which maybe we'll make a rules video or something later, and I'll go into more depth about how that works. This is your best turn 1 card to see. Scry this, guys. What it's going to do is basically just draw a card into your memory, because you'll be level 0 when you're usually playing this card, just your spirit, and it's going to let you just go into your level 1 Rye really easily. And then the thing that's really great about this is that once you are at your level 2 Rye, You can play this for 1, it replaces itself, and then you get that enlightenment counter for free. And you can glimpse it a little bit as well. So it's going to buff up your counters, replace itself, and just like give you a lot of value. Here's your other starting turn play. It's Floating Memory, it's a mage spell, and it's water. So this card just has a lot of synergies. It can slow your opponent down a little bit as well. So it's just a really solid card. Then we have 4 Mistbound Watchers. This is something that you're going to want to be really careful about if you're playing against Lorraine. You don't want to just play this out early and give them a free card to attack into or sweep and draw. But this can be a really good card to drop kind of in the mid game after they've maybe leveled up already into their level 2. Or if you're just playing against, especially against another control deck like a Water Xander or something, this is a really good thing to drop. Hopefully just keep stacking on some enlightenment counters. And worst case scenario, they target it for attacks and it basically turned into a deflecting edge and prevented 3 damage from your champion. Then we have Glacial Guidance. This is a really solid card. A lot of people will go into like a Ghost of Pendragon or something like that, and that might be one of their only allies. Maybe they have like another 1 attack ally as well. If you just go Glacial Guidance, you can basically, this is essentially almost just another deflecting edge, but you would also get to have a mage spell trigger if you're level 2, and then also get an enlightenment counter. So you'll get 2 of the 3 enlightenment counters that you need to draw a card just by playing this, and it's also a 1 cost and it's water. Having a high water count is really important in this deck, which we'll get to later, but this is a really solid, cheap defensive option. However, if your opponent has a bigger board, a wider board, these will rest 2 allies instead of just 1, and it will also prevent them from waking up. So you're only going to get 1 enlightenment counter because it's the mage spell, but like Glacial gives you 2 from its effect. This one is going to be a little bit more defensive, but cost more resources, essentially. And then you have Freezing Hail, which honestly, like, not great. Kind of just running this because our options are limited. It can kill off a unit, but any unit that you're killing off with only 2 damage wasn't really probably that big of a threat to you anyways. But it is a mage spell, it is water, so we have synergies there, and it prevents something from waking up. So if you don't have one of your other options and they're swinging at you with something like a Gildus or a Ghost of Pendragon or something, this can help buy you some time. And then we have our mill package, and it is a very small mill package. So we have 4 Sink into Oblivion. This card literally just reads, target player puts the top 3 cards of their deck into their graveyard. With Grand Archive, you have minimum 60 card decks, so 3 cards is not that many, and it also costs 3, which is kind of a hefty cost. However, it is a mage spell, so you'll get that enlightenment counter, and it is water. So the reason that I kept pointing out that so many cards are water is because of Avalon. So Avalon is a 4-cost unique domain. So this is kind of like a stadium or what have you, in Pokemon, for example. So you'll put it out, and it'll be the only one you can put out since it is that unique tagline. And then if you ever materialize a card, you have to sacrifice it. A really important thing to know is that Dungeon Guide actually does count as materializing, even though it just says like level up your champion. It is a materialization, so just be wary of that. But then whenever you activate a water element card, target player puts the top 2 cards of their deck into their graveyard. And that can be on either player's turn. So if you start playing a bunch of the really cheap, 1-cost water cards and stuff, you can start milling quite a lot of cards in a turn. This is a very crucial card to see in the deck, and is a part of the reason why I went with Rise, because you have to like draw a lot of cards and see this. Because if you don't see this, you're just not going to have enough mill or damage to actually win the game. Then we have some more defensive cards in the form of Recover. So this is an attack. It can do 3 damage, which is actually enough to kill off quite a lot of good units in the game. So not only does this clear their board from some threats to you, it also will recover 3, which is really solid. And then this is a card that I really like, Revitalizing Cleanse. It is fast. It is unfortunately a cleric spell, so you cannot copy this. If this was a mage spell, I think this deck could actually be like maybe tier 2. But unfortunately it is just a cleric spell, so you're not going to get your level enlightenment bonus, and you can't copy it with your level 3. But you reveal all your cards in your memory, and you can recover X, which is again why we have such a big intention on keeping such a big hand. That's why like pretty much everything in the material deck is draw a card or something, because you want to have a really big hand. Let your opponent play their turn. They might not do much, and then at the end phase of their turn, you put down 5, and then you go cleanse, show a full board of water, take a bunch of damage off your opponent, and then you draw a card, so it completely replaces itself too. This is a really, really fantastic card that I think will see a lot more play once water decks actually become good. And then we have 4 Water Barrier and 4 Spell Shield Arcane. These are extremely similar cards, and basically the reason why I think this deck actually does have a pretty good matchup against something like Fire Ride or something. So Water Barrier is going to prevent the damage except for 1 damage, and then Arcane is going to actually prevent all of the damage. You can't do it until you're level 3, and then you also get that many Enlightenment counters as well. They're both mage spells, so you'll get your level 2 Enlightenment counter, and then if you're doing Water Barrier, you might even mill your opponent if you have an Avalon out. These are really, really fantastic and your biggest form of defense, and it's also why this deck struggles primarily against decks like Wind Lorraine that are putting out a really wide board, because when they're doing an Onsole against you, Water Barrier stopping, 2 or 3 damage from a sword isn't doing that much. But if they're trying to do like a Rending Flames for 14 against you or a Fireball for 20, all of a sudden Water Barrier and Arcane Shield are really good cards. Then we have our only way to really deal with wide boards, and I accidentally have 1 proxy in here, but it's going to be 4 Anger the Skies. So these are our only arcane cards, is the 4 Anger the Skies and the 4 Arcane Shield. This is basically just going to do 4 damage to all allies, and this is a mage spell, so you actually can repeat this. Let's say maybe most things in this game only have 4 health or less right now, but if your opponent tries to buff their health with that Melody card that gives like 2 health to all allies, or maybe Favorable Winds that gives 1 health, you could theoretically copy the Anger the Skies. You don't really care about the fact that it's a dark hole kind of effect where it's hitting your board as well, because you're not really running many allies in this deck. But this is going to help, you stall out for a few turns, making things not recover on their wake up phase and everything, and then once they build up a really huge board, you just go Anger the Skies and clear it out. And you can stabilize. I played against a Wind Lorraine, and we got to like turn 20 or something like that because I had cleared the board a few times, and I just kept recovering and everything, but he did. I have actually yet to win with this deck, full disclosure. But I've mostly tested against Wind Lorraine, which is what I do believe is the worst matchup. But so yeah, this is definitely not a tier 1 meta deck or anything, but it's a unique gameplay that no deck is really doing right now, and just something that can definitely be fun. If your locals is a lot of Arcane Rye, or a lot of, even maybe Erupting Rhapsody Rye or something, a lot of decks that are just focused on doing one really big swing at you, this can absolutely contest with those. But it's the chip damage decks that this definitely does struggle with. But hopefully you can have some fun with this and just enjoy Grand Archive. Right now there's not a lot of like huge tournaments coming up or anything, so our team's kind of taking some time to really enjoy the release and just have some fun with some unique decks. But we'll make sure to have some more content for you guys soon. Enjoy.